I am the Warped Adventure, and we're back with another deck tech. Today, we're doing a deck tech on Reality Chip. Now, this one's probably one of my more unique commanders, I would say. I don't see many other people running him or it. And it's a 0/4 jellyfish equipment, artifact, creature. It costs 2, a 1 and a blue. And it has reconfigure for 3, which means you can equip it to something as if it were an equipment. And when it's equipped, it becomes no longer a creature. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as reality chip's equipped to something, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. So basically, it's like having another card extra slot in hand that never goes away. Um, and so this is heavy, heavy, heavy artifacts. And let's begin with ramp. So we got the quintessential stuff you would see in a artifact deck, and as far as ramp goes, you got Soul Ring, you got Arcane Signet, you got Thought Vessel, which is there because this deck is heavy card draw. I mean heavy card draw. You got and it's you have no maximum hand size, so it just means you don't have to pitch all those really nice cards you just snagged. You got a Mind Stone, just for a little bit extra mana. You got a Burnished Heart, which you can sack. It costs 3 for a 2/2. You can pay 3, sacrifice it at a later time or whenever, and fetch 2 basic lands to the battlefield tapped after sacrificing Burnished Heart. Really nice. Then you got Liquid Metal Torque. It costs 2, tap static colorless, or tap to turn target non-land permanent into an artifact until end of turn, which is super helpful. If you have any if this was in like a artifact removal deck or not, if it was in a deck that had a lot of like artifact and enchantment removal, it'd be super helpful because you can turn that creature that's an issue into an artifact, or you could turn Maze's End into an artifact, or you could turn really anything you want into an artifact, and then cast your shatter or whatever to take out the artifact. And Silver Mirror, it costs 2, add a blue, and it's a creature. Now, if you noticed, almost every artifact ramp spell in here costed 2 or less. Silver Mirror costs 2, Liquid Metal Torque costs 2, Mind Stone costs 2, Thought Vessel costs 2, Arcane Signet costs 2, Soul Ring costs 1, Burnished Heart costs 3, but that's okay. And that's because there is a lot of cheapening in here. You like to cheapen your stuff. So, moving on to ways to cheapen your stuff. You have good old Foundry Inspector. It's a 3/2 for 3. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Then you have Ethereum Sculptor. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Notably, this one costs 1 less, but it costs a blue, so you can't make it free. Um, Kefnet's Monument. Blue creature spells you cast cost 1 less, and whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Keep in mind, that does not tap it down. So if a creature just attacked you last turn, you cast a creature spell and it won't untap. And it's a really nice way to keep those heavy swinging decks from attacking you. You can threaten them with, well, I could make sure you just never are able to untap those creatures, or swing them somewhere else. Now we're moving on to the artifact synergies, which I don't know if you can tell, but there's quite a few in here. Um, some of them may seem uh, basic, but they're all there for a reason. You got Voltaic Servant. On end step, you untap target artifact. It's have maybe a creature that has a activated ability and you want to activate on somebody else's turn, you could just on end step untap that artifact creature or whatever. It seems pretty basic, and it kind of is, but regardless, it's still helpful. I moved those a little too much. There we go. Now we got inspiring statuary because there's quite a few non-artifact. There's a decent amount of non-artifact stuff. So being able to tap your artifacts to pay for the colorless mana on them, really helpful. This deck loves to make things cheap and loves to have a ton of mana. And when it's all four wheels are on the ground and it's really going, excuse me, and it's really going, it is a devastating deck to behold because it will just take a good 30-minute turn and it's not doing nothing like most decks do when they're taking 30 minutes. By the end of that 30-minute turn, they went from 3 creatures on board to probably like 30. It's quite easy to build up that quick with this kind of deck. And so ways to keep the turn going, mana, cheapening, really helpful, along with card draw. Then you got the Peregrine Dynamo. If 1/5 haste, you can pay a colorless tap, copy target activated or triggered ability from another legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose new targets for the copy. This one, super nice. Whether you want it for a blocker or it has haste so you could bring it out and use it immediately. Um, and yeah, it's just really nice. And if you want, you can like activate it and then find a way to blink it and activate it again. And so as long as you can keep blinking it, it comes out and you can activate it immediately since it has haste. You got Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter. Flash, 1/2 flying. You may cast colorless and artifact spells as though they had flash. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than his power, put a 1/1 counter on Liberator. Basically, you love to have the flash on all your artifacts and stuff, so that way you don't have to do it on your turn, and you can cast stuff in response on other people's turns. So when you finally run out of mana on your end step, you have your Voltaic and untap your Soul Ring, and that may not seem like a lot, but letting you continue casting stuff on other people's turns means you could tap that Soul Ring and cast your Mind Stone. Tap the Mind Stone to cast your cheapened Kraken's Eye or something like that. It just lets you continue moving on. Next, we got Whirler Rogue. Enters, creates you 2 Thopters, and you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Now, both abilities you like for this deck. So when it enters, it gives you the 2 Thopters. If there's a few ways to blink stuff in here, so you could keep getting those Thopters if you want. But the biggest part is tapping 2 untapped artifacts to just start making your stuff unblockable. That could be a win con. I didn't put it in with the win cons because it's not ever been a win con for me, but it can be. So it's something to keep in mind. Next, we got Riddlesmith. 2/1, cost 2. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Basically, if you have some stuff in hand you don't like and you just want to keep remorphing your hand, just cast some artifacts, draw some cards, pitch the cards you don't want. Super nice. Next, we got you should go in the win cons, I guess. No, you're never even a win con for me. So Mirrodin Besieged. When it enters battlefield, choose Mirren or Phyrexian. I always choose Mirren, but Phyrexian is an option. So Mirren, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. The other one is Phyrexian. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. Then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. I don't really like cards that just say like lose the game or win the game on them. But that's why I always choose Mirren because it's just super nice. Cast artifact, get artifact, and it just really keeps the engine going. And if you really feel like it, and if you just got board wiped or something on your artifacts, you play Mirrored and Besieged, choose Phyrexian, end step, draw a card, pitch a card, target opponent loses the game. It's there. I wouldn't say play it for the Phyrexian side because it's not like you win the game, it's target opponent loses the game. And so even if you take out one person with it, the other two people at the table see it as a threat and take it out. But if you have it as Mirren, you might be able to just win the game yourself with it without having to slowly shoot at other people out of the game. So another reason why I would prefer Mirren over Phyrexian. That and I despise Phyrexians. I hate them. Um, Next, we got Thopter Spy Network, a pretty obvious ad. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, you get a 1/1 Thopter with flying. Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control hit a player, draw a card. And it's combat damage, not just damage. So keep that in mind too. Eh, it's an obvious ad. I don't feel like I need to explain it a whole lot, but just in the early game, getting those stoppers out is a really nice way to chump block because a lot of what you're going to be doing is chump blocking in the early game as you're building up your board and ramping up and getting to the position where you can take those 30-minute turns. You got Master of Ethereum. Star, his power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts you control, and other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Keep in mind, he is an artifact creature, so he counts himself. Excuse me. And all those Thopters are getting buffed, all those mirrors are getting buffed. It's just a pretty nice way to possibly just swing for game with all your 1/1 tokens that are being turned into 2/2s and other ways to 4/4s or something. Stuff like that. You got Blade of Shared Souls. This one you could easily replace with something else. I don't have anything better for this deck yet than Blade of Shared Souls to replace it, so it's still in here. For Mirrodin, enters battlefield, create a 2/2 Rebel and equip this to it. And whenever it becomes attached to a creature, for as long as Blade of Shared Souls remains attached to it, you may have that creature become a copy of another target creature you control. Basically, it's just there to create your copies of, I don't know, your um, any of your really nice non-legendary creatures, which there's a decent amount of in here. You got Fabricate, which I was super happy to pull this. I pulled it recently out of a, I don't remember what it was out of, but it's the Fabricate from Warhammer 40K. Super nice, shiny too. But basically, pay 3, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. It's an obvious ad. You just cast it and go find whatever artifact you want, put it into your hand, call it a day. That's nice. Next, we got Hexavis. He's a 0/0 flying. When he enters the battlefield, put 6 1/1 counters on him. He costs 6. One colorless, remove a 1/1 counter from Hexavis. Put a flying counter on another target creature. One colorless, remove a counter from another creature you control. Put a 1/1 counter on Hexavis. Basically, you can remove a bunch of counters from him, turn all your creatures into flying, or your big creatures into flying, and start punching people in the face in the air. Because the issue with combo decks is they need a way to end the game, or else those aggro decks are just going to put you down. So you got to have a way to survive and a way to end the game. And this one has a few different ways to end the game. Decent amount from combat damage alone. Other ways, you just people might just give up because how long you're taking, and they can see at a point that they're losing. Um, there's you keep your opponents tapped down and just punch them that way. There's plenty of ways to handle it. Next, we got Shimmermere. It 2/2 flash. You may cast artifact cards as though they had flash. And it's just super helpful because, um, again, same thing as the Battle Flopter. Do it on other people's turns. Continue the train going. even when the train should be at a stop. You got Mirror Battlesphere, pretty obvious ad. They're adding it to like every deck nowadays, so every precon, I mean. So it's a pretty decent ad. And it gives you 4 mirrors on enter, and it could be a win con if you have enough mirrors. It's just super helpful. You got Urza, Power Stone Prodigy. Uh, More ways to get mana. He's a 1/3 Vigi, one color tap, draw card, then pitch a card. Pitch is discard, by the way. I don't know if I've ever said that, but pitch is discard. But yeah, colors tap, draw card, then pitch a card. Whenever you pitch one or more artifact cards, create a tapped Power Stone. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, early game allows you to get some uh, ramp in, and most of your stuff is artifacts, so those Power Stones will be extremely helpful. Thought Monitor, 2/2 affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less for each artifact you control. So eventually it'll just cost a blue. 2/2 flying, when it enters battlefield, draw 2 cards. Again, blink it to continue drawing cards, or plenty of options to do with it. Then we got Slagstone Refinery, which is a super fun card. Whenever it or another non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, or is put into exile from the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. So keep in mind, your blinking and such will be seen by Slagstone Refinery, and it will give you a Power Stone just for blinking. So that's a fun note. And if you just got board wiped if your artifacts just got board wiped or something like that, it'll dump some Power Stones on the field for you. Just, you know, a really nice way to add a bunch of mana, recover from something, or again, keep the turn going. We got Sai, Master Thopterist. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 Thopter with flying. You pay 2, sack 2 artifacts to draw a card. He's 1/4 for 3. Now, that is super nice. Basically, the thing about this deck is you're casting a whole lot of artifacts. And one of the ways to end the game is just keep casting artifacts, keep getting stuff for casting them, such as mirrors or such as Thopters, and start punching people in the face with said tokens. Super nice. I really want to get Crashing Drawbridge for this, because that one you just tap all your creatures you control again, he's still on turn. Super helpful, but it's not in here yet. And the final one is Shimmer Dragon. It's a 5/6 flying. As long as you control 4 more artifacts, it has hexproof, and you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to draw a card. May not seem like much at first glance, but you have 10 mirrors out, 10 Thopters, and a whole bunch of other non-tokens on, like, let's say 6 Power Stones. So the Power Stones alone, you tap all 6 of them to draw 3 cards. You can tap all 20 of the other tokens to draw another 10 cards. So you just tapping those, you could draw 13 cards. You could do it at any time. It protects itself. It's a pretty decent big old flyer, and it's just super good. And it ignores summoning sickness because it's forcing them to tap. So you could tap the ones that just came in that would ordinarily be rather useless unless for chumping, to just draw a bunch of cards and keep the turn going. When he gets out, that means we're in the end times now. I didn't put him as a win con because he himself doesn't end games and doesn't quite bring around the end of the game. But when he comes out, that means I'm gonna find something else that will end the game. So on to board wipes. There's only 2 of them. One is a creature board wipe, the other is not. We'll start with the creature board wipe. Scourge of Fleets. 6/6, when it enters battlefield, return each creature your opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. In a pure blue deck, it's easy to have, especially with this deck, because you hardly ever miss land drops if you play it right, because you're just playing from the top of your library all the time. if you have lands in hand, don't play them immediately. Instead, you want to keep playing stuff from the top. And when you hit a land on top of your library, if you would have had played your land already, you'd be stuck and you wouldn't be able to continue playing from the top, and your turn would be over soon after that. But, unless you have ways to draw cards, but if you play that land from the top and then hopefully not hit another land, you can keep going. And the lands in hand you can use when you're just not hitting a land and you need extra mana. Super helpful. And right, the point being is you're going to have a lot of islands with this deck easily. And so when he enters, basically a board wipe for everyone but you. And that, I guess he's kind of a game ender, isn't he? As you play him, clears your opponent's board, swing for game. It's like it's like an overloaded cyclonic rift, but not quite as devastating. Costs the same, not quite as devastating, but it is a 6/6, so I guess it itself can hit pretty hard. And one of my favorite board wipes of all time, Hercule's Final Meditation. Now it costs 7, and it's an instant, but it costs 3 more to cast if it's not during your turn. So if you're casting it as an instant, it costs 10 mana. Probably one of the most expensive board wipes, if I had to take a gander of a guess. But sure as hell worth it. Because return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, then end the turn. So, if you don't know what that means, basically exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn until end of turn effects end. So basically, you they untap, and in response to them going to draw, or after they untap, you cast Hercule's Final Meditation, clear everybody's boards, and their turn just ends. And they go down to hand size. So I'd say this one's better than Cyclonic Rift, in my disgustingly humble opinion, as internet historian would put it. But yes, devastating card. It can be painful if you're casting it for 7 on your turn, but it's amazing if you're casting it on somebody else's turn because it's just a blowout for them. Because they also discard down to hand size unless they got a land that does the no maximum hand size, and I'm blanking on its name right now. But yeah, devastating board wipe. Moving on, we have the more combat focused stuff, which there's only 4 of, but you'll see a little bit more spread out through here. Just throw her around, why don't you? Yeah, put her there. We got Etched Champion, 2/2, Metalcraft, has Etched Champion has protection from all colors as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. I put him in the combat focus stuff because you have a decent amount of board wide artifact, your board wide artifact creature buff, and so you just like eventually it could become a 6/6, and you swing them, and just nobody can block them unless they got colorless creatures. Super nice, and yeah, it costs 3 for 2/2, which I wish it was a 3/3, but I get it. Next, we got Videlkin Humiliator, which it's surprising how devastating this one sounds, but when it's actually in use, it doesn't end up being as devastating as you imagine it being. So he's a 3/4 Metalcraft. Whenever he attacks, if you control 3 or more artifacts, creatures your opponents control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. That is actually really, really, really terrifying. However, it never ends up being terrifying. You know, I mean, you're swinging all the time and you may get that off, but if they have counters on them, they're still going to be bigger than 1/1s, which, isn't that bad. They could be like 3/3s or whatever, but the point being is as he is devastating, but not as devastating as he sounds. He's kind of a tricky little hobbitses right there. Edit this part out. Moving on, we got Tetsuko Umezawa, Fugitive. We got Tetsuko here. She's a 1/3. Creatures you control with power toughness 1 can't be blocked. Or less. Sorry. I'm just going to restart that. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. So all those 1/1 mirrors and 1/1 Thopters you're creating, unless you're buffing them, they're unblockable. So you can easily punch through and hit people. She's super nice in this deck. Granted, you end up wishing she would be doing more, but she still ends up pulling her work, if that makes sense. And we got Sharding Sphinx. 4/4 flying. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Basically, really nice. And it itself is an artifact creature, so it will start building your artifact creatures itself if you somehow manage to not have any artifact creatures to hit someone with. Moving on to interaction and control. So in here we have 2 counter spells. Cancel, obvious. 3, counter target spell. Nice, easy to pull. You almost always can just, boom, I don't like that spell, so I'm going to counter it. Everyone loves blue, right? And you got Override. Counter target spell. Unless the controller pays 1 colorless for each artifact you control. Yeah, that's probably never going to happen. They're casting a big spell you don't like. You cast this and, yeah, pay 12 mana or else that's countered. Moving on, we have, well, not moving on from this, but onto the removal. You got Pongify, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated, and its controller creates a 3/3 green ape creature token. And yeah, it costs a blue. It's an instant, insanely good removal. You don't see a lot like it in blue, but you find some, and it's just so good because it's a 1 blue for an instant. Destroy any creature you want and give them a 3/3. It's like a really, it's just a, I wouldn't say better. I would say it's equal to the generous gift or the beast within. While they do hit non-land permanents, I believe, or just I believe they hit permanents, so they hit whatever you want. They cost 3 and still give a 3/3 each. This is Blue's version, and while it only hits creatures, it's just costs 1 and can't be regenerated. You don't see a lot of regenerate, but it might matter sometime. And yeah, it's just I would say it's equal because it costs a decent amount less. You don't have to leave 3 open. You can just leave this 1 island aside and use the rest how you like. Next, we have Raven form. I would say this one's slightly worse, but it hits more. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. You can foretell it to cast it for 1 later, so that's nice. But it's a sorcery, so you can't use it at instant speed, and that is actually quite devastating because you have to wait till your turn to deal with that um, encroaching mycosynth. That's an issue. I thought of that because that's a card in here. But yeah, super helpful. It hits an artifact or creature. It's exiled, so it gets around indestructible, and it only gives them 1/1, but that 1/1 does have flying. And it costs the same as your Beast Within or your Generous Gift. So I would say it's not as good as Pongify, Beast Within, or Generous Gift, but I'd say it's up there with decent removal spells. And the little bit of extra control, opposition. It's pretty devastating. Tap an untapped creature you control. Tap target artifact, creature, or land. That is disgusting. So all those like the 21 ones I just mentioned about the Shimmer Dragon. Yeah, no, how about you just tap 10 of them and tap down all your creatures, tap the other 10, uh, tap down those lands you have untapped for that counter spell later, and just go for game right now. Make sure people can't screw with you, or if they can screw it with you regardless, make them do it now. You're going to do it when I want you to. Everyone loves blue, right? Now, these are like the more universally helpful stuff, so they're not going to be as crazy, but they're still helpful. So you got Sad Robot. ETBs fetches you land, and when it dies, you draw a card. You see it in so many different decks, and it's because it's just really, really helpful. It can, when it comes out, it fetches you that basic land, and that's really nice. If you want, you can blink it if you're running low on land somehow. And when it dies, you can draw that card, which is also decently nice. It's in here for mainly the land fetching, because the card draw, you will have no issues with that with this deck. But extra card draw is always not bad. Next is Swiftfoot Boots. You're gonna see a lot of that card in my decks because it's just helpful. I prefer not Lightning Greaves because it gives the creatures equipped to Shroud. The only difference between Shroud and Hexproof is Hexproof stops your opponents from targeting it. Shroud stops everybody from targeting it, including yourself. So Shroud is kind of a worse Hexproof, but also can be situationally better. So if someone's like doing a deflecting SWAT and moving your Pongify to target your Drafna, founder of Latnam, instead they can't do that because it actually has Shroud. So you yourself can't target it. But that also means you can't target it with protection spells. You can't target it with your Drafna to bounce it back to hand. You have to move the Lightning Greaves off of it, which is why that one costs 0 to equip, and this one costs 1 to equip. That one costs 0 because of the Shroud instead of Hexproof. And that way you can move the Lightning Greaves, then cast a spell you're going to target with it, let it resolve, then move the Lightning Greaves back on. So there's ways around it, but it just gives your opponents more opportunities to target that thing, which you don't want to do, which is why I just prefer Swiftfoot Boots. In this deck, mana is not at all an issue. You get so much of it. A card that I'm willing to trade out, get out of this deck, but also it's okay, is Maze Mind Tone. Tap, put a page counter on it, you can scry one. Manipulating the top card of your deck is actually really helpful in Reality Chip, so scrying is useful. But pay 2 colors, tap, put another counter on it to draw a card. So you have that option. Or when there are 4 or more counters on it, exile it if you do, gain 4 life. I don't like it nearly as much as I normally would because the exiling it is not an option. If it said you may, this would be worth its rare status. But my humble opinion, my disgustingly humble opinion, I think it should be an uncommon just because it forces you to exile it, and the 4 life you gain is not nearly as helpful as all the scrying and card drawing it could be giving you. But Born Upon a Wind, you may cast spells this turn as though they had flash and draw a card. Cost 2. Um, Pretty simple. It's like the Shimmer Mirror, and it's like the Battlethopter in the regard of just keep doing stuff on other people's turns. This one is far more difficult for them to handle because it's not an artifact creature, it's not a creature. They would have to counter it, and that's the only way you would be able to really handle it. Or else you just start casting stuff on their turn whenever you want. So it's really helpful for like if someone's casting something you really don't like and you want it gone, you can Born Upon a Wind to Raven form it. And even though Raven forms a sorcery, you let Born Upon a Wind cast it on their turn, and then you cast the Raven form to handle your issue. So I would say Born Upon a Wind is more one time useful, but the other two will get you more use over time. They're just easier to handle. I don't have a Dark Steel Forge in this yet, which I'm really sad about. But moving on, you got Min, Wily Illusionist. As I said, you're drawing a lot of cards. You're almost always gonna be getting that illusion every on your turn. If you can manage to draw cards on other people's turns to get more Min triggers, it's really smart. So like your so like your Shimmer Dragon. Yeah, we got Shivan Dragons in pure blue now. But now your Shimmer Dragon, if you do like leave 4 of your creatures untapped, or I would say leave 12 of your no, yeah, leave 12 of your creatures untapped, or artifacts untapped, I should say, and just tap 4 of them on each person's turn to draw 2 cards. So that way you get Min's trigger every single turn. It makes Min pretty scary, and there's a reason why people can make terrifying decks out of Min. She's super nice. Then you got Sphinx of Magosi. It's a 6/6 flying. Pay 3, draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on it. Um, this one, it's an odd ad. It was honestly kind of a filler card, and I haven't found a replacement for it yet. But also, it's just pay 3, draw a card is really nice, and it doesn't tap to do it. It gets bigger, so if you have that wolf deck that is being a really big issue, but it doesn't have an answer for flyers, you swing this in the late game, and it could be like a 13/13 or 14/14, punch them pretty hard, and maybe eventually you'll be able to take them out. Point being is, it's decently helpful. I would suggest finding a different card to add to your deck, but if you happen to have one, feel free to add it. It's not a bad ad at all. Then we got good old Skull Clamp. In this deck, like I've been saying, you've got a bunch of creatures that have 1 toughness. So all that card draw is beautiful. And also, fun thing is Min's creatures also that she makes also have 1 toughness, no matter how many of them you have. So you could just do Min's thing. Um, you could kill Min's illusions to draw cards and cheat out a card, which is what Min loves to do. You got Bident of Thassa. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And pay 2, tap creatures your opponents control, attack this turn if able. So, if you're getting into a stalemate and you want the game to end, you just activate it and make people start swinging. And it's really nice if you just want to make sure your opponent. But a good way to just like get the game to end is to activate Biden to Thassa and just make everyone full swing. So that really helps end games because believe it or not, if you full swing, you don't have blockers. And it doesn't say you have to full swing, but generally after you activate this, the next turn, you're gonna just start knocking people out. And so also a little bit extra card draw. Always good. And finally, you got Symmetrix Matrix. Whenever a creature with power equal to its toughness, ETB, is under control, you may pay 1 colorless. If you do, draw a card. Really nice. All those tokens you're making are all gonna be at like 1/1s or something, unless you're getting tokens from your Min, in which case they won't be 1/1s for long. But if you are running low on card draw and you're about to dump out a bunch of 1/1s, leave a little bit of extra mana open. You can just pay some mana into it and draw a bunch of cards. Use those power stones you've been using up and waiting on and doing nothing with to activate your Symmetrix. Moving on, we have we have my infinite combo for this deck. I only have two decks with infinite combos in them. Um, and a fun little side note: almost all the infinite combos um, I make are super janky, require a whole lot of cards, and it just makes it hilarious. So, um, let's start with an important piece. Drafna, founder of Latinam. 2-1, pay 2 colors, return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. And later, you can pay 3, tap, copy target artifact spell you control. So you cast this early game and you're in late game now. So keep that in mind. You're able to activate it now. Then Displacer Kitten. I'm going to describe how the infinite combo works after reading off the cards. Displacer Kitten is 2/2 for 4. Avoidance. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to one target non-land permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Next is Caged Sun. As it enters, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1. And whenever a land's ability causes you to add one or more mana of the chosen color, add one additional mana of that color. So you're always choosing blue. So all your blue lands are tapping for extra blue, stuff like that. Mirren Spy. 1/3 flying. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may untap target creature. Then you got Ihoria's Familiar. 2/2 flying. Historic spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast. Then Lorith of the Healing House. Untap another target permanent, or untap 2 other target legendary creatures. Then you got Sculpting Steel. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. And Cloud of Fairies. 1/1 flying for 2. When they come into play, untap 2 lands. And you can cycle it if you want. But, so you have Drafna out. And you have Caged Sun out. And you have Ihoria's Familiar out. You have Mirren Spy out. You have Displacer Kitten out. And you have Lorith of the Healing House out. So, let me just lay these out for you. So, you cast Cloud of Fairies. You untap the 2 lands you used for it, or the 1 land you used for it, really. And you play Sculpting Steel. For the you now have 2 lands tapped because your lands tapped for 2 each because of Caged Sun. So when you cast this, you have it enter as a copy of Ihoria's Familiar. And since you cast it and it's not a creature spell, Displacer Kitten will blink your Cloud of Fairies and untap the 2 lands. You now have you now have 1 blue mana floating. Then you pay 2, you tap a land to return. So on cast, you pay 3 and tap Drafna to copy Sculpting Steel. So there's now 2. There's now 3 Ihoria's Familiars. Then you pay 2 to return Sculpting Steel to your hand. Then you cast Sculpting Steel for 1 because you have 2 Ihoria's Familiars out, so it only costs 1. Then you pay another. Then on cast, Mirren Spy will untap your Drafna, and Displacer Kitten will blink your Cloud of Fairies to untap the lands you have tapped. Then you continue doing that until you have 6 token, 6 Ihoria's Familiars, not including the main Sculpting Steel. So with the main Sculpting Steel, you have 7, including Ihoria's Familiar, the main one. But you activate Drafna to pull this back to hand. Then you cast this for free, paying 3 to copy it, and have those enter as Caged Sun. Then you pay 2 and then Mirror and Spy untaps that. Displacer can untap some mana used for Drafna. You pay 2, bounce Sculpting Steel back to hand, and continue doing that. And eventually, you'll have as many Caged Suns as you want. Your blue creatures will be as big as you need them to be. Um, and eventually, it's just going to get out of control. And Lorth of the Healing House does have a use here. I didn't mention her, but if you want, you could tap her to untap Drafna and something else, and the Mirror and Spy will untap her. So it can widen the amount of stuff you can do with the infinite combo, but without her, this is the base. I hope that made sense. So basically, you're going to have infinite mana, you're going to have infinitely big creatures, and you can have infinite amount of whatever artifacts you want because you just keep bouncing Sculpting Steel back to hand and copying it with Drafna, untapping Drafna with Mirror and Spy, and having them enter as a copy of your Sharding Sphinx. Then have keep the token, bounce the main one back to hand, and have a copy of your uh, Thran Spider or your Shimmer Dragon for some reason, or your Mere Battle Sphere. And basically, things get out of control fast. Or if you want, have it enter as a copy of Blade of Shared Souls, and that creates you the 2/2 and equips itself to it. And then you can have that become a copy of whatever creature you want. So basically, this lets you have infinite mana, infinitely big blue creatures, and infinite amount of whatever artifacts you want. That is the main thing you build to with this deck. On, um, I'll just read this one. Threatened Spider, 2/4 reach, enters the battlefield. You and target opponent each create a tap Power Stone, and you pay 7. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Reveal an artifact card from among them. Put it into your hand. Put the rest in the body of your library in a random order. That is the activated ability of it. Is mainly a desperation move, but Thran Spider itself is in here. That way you can help out your opponents, get on their good side a little bit more, and perhaps aid yourself in the early game. And if you really want, you can start blanking it or create copies of it to start helping your opponents more and more and get yourself more of that sweet, sweet mana. Now, these two, while really, really good in the infinite combo, are really really good on their own. First, Kraken's Eye. Whenever a player casts a blue spell, you may gain 1 life. So that's just whenever anybody casts any blue spell, even if it has other colors within it, you gain life. And Golem's Heart, whenever a player casts an artifact spell, you may gain 1 life. So if you add this into your infinite combo, you now have infinite life too. Or infinite life gain, I should say. Because of how big and janky this infinite combo is, if anyone destroys any piece of the combo, that any piece of the non-creature combo, then you're done for. Or your non-artifact combo. Because if they like move to destroy your Caged Sun, in response you just bounce Sculpting Steel back to hand and cast it and have it enter as a copy of Caged Sun. That way when they blow that up, you still have the token copy of it. Bounce Sculpting Steel back to hand and keep it going. But any removal for like Drafna, Displacer Kitten, Mirror and Spy, or Cloud of Fairies just ends the combo really, really easily. And that's why we love janky combos, because they're hilarious, hard to build, hard to manage, and you feel so smart when you put them together. Unlike those 2-card infinite combos, which is like, wow, how did you figure that out? So amazing. Anyways, I don't have an opinion. Moving on, we got the win cons. We'll start with the more simple win cons and move from there. So the first one, Arcbound Crusher, 0/0, trample. Whenever another artifact comes into play, you put a 1/1 counter on Arcbound Crusher, and this comes into play with a 1/1 counter on itself. And once put into graveyard, you may put its counters on a target artifact creature. So basically, over time, it's going to get freaking massive. And it has trample, one of the few creatures in here that has trample. So you get it big enough easily in the late game, it can easily be like a 50-50. And swing at someone, use your, where are you? What's your face? You sorry, use your Whirler Rogue to tap 2 artifacts and make it unblockable and just start knocking people out of the game. Pretty simple, pretty easy to handle too. Some is really easy to destroy and so it's there. Next you have Soulblade Genie, 4/3 flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Now add that into the infinite combo. That infinite combo just becomes a game ender because that means all your creatures get infinitely big. So that's fun. But also, even anywhere else, you could cast like easily 8 non-creature spells in a single turn if you're going on a long turn, and that you just buffed all your 10/1/1 flyers into 9/9s at minimum, and all your 1/1 ground tokens into 9/9s at minimum. So that could easily start knocking people out of the game. Next, Platinum Angel. You start making token copies of it, and it becomes super hard to deal with. It's 4/4 flying. You can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. If they don't immediately pull, that means they probably have a response to it. But all it takes is start making copies of Platinum Angel, and it's game over. They're just board wipe is the only thing that can get them out of it. The removal can't handle it because unless they have enough removal to be able to just wipe out all the copies of Platinum Angel, things are just gonna be really, 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 really hard to handle because they just can't win, and I just can't lose. It costs 7, but again, mana is not an issue in this deck. Let's go with Encroaching Mycosynth next. Favorite card in this deck by far. Non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to the other types. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So basically, all your non-land permanents in your graveyard are artifacts. All non-land permanents in your deck are artifacts. All non-land permanents on the battlefield for you are artifacts. And all non-land permanents you're casting are artifacts. So basically, that just means your entire board is an artifact except for lands. And at that point, things get ridiculous. It's in the game ender because it itself can make other things into game enders. Because no matter what you do, it's gonna like it because everything's an artifact except for instant sorceries and most lands. Next, we got Forsaken Monument. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for a colorless mana, add an additional colorless mana. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. May not seem like a game ender, but I put it in the game enders because all those 1/1 flyers you made over the course of the game are now at minimum 33 flyers. With all the other mass buff you got, they could become 4/4s, 5/5s, 11/11 flyers, and there's like 15 1/1 flyers that are actually 15 flyers or something. It could get ridiculous rather quickly. And so mass buff for all your tokens is really nice. And a very clear game ender is March of Progress. Choose target artifact creature you control. For each creature chosen this way, create a token that's a copy of it. Now it has overload for 7, so just create a token copy if you have encroaching mycosynth out, which I always wait to get that out before I cast overloaded March of Progress. Then create a token copy of all your creatures on the board. It's ridiculous. So oh yeah, I forgot to mention the lands, the non-basic lands. So we got Seat of the Synod, artifact land, taps for blue. It's basically an artifact basic land. Then we got Phyrexia's Core. Tap out a colorless, or you could pay colorless, tap, sack an artifact to gain a life. If you really want to do the Phyrexian route on the Mirrored and Besieged, if you want to go Phyrexian, you can start sacking your artifacts to build up to it. Mage Ring Network to store mana, and when it comes late game, you can just start removing mana, well, counters from it, to start dumping mana into your mana pool. Really helpful. Then you got Halimar Depths. I really like this one. And enters battlefield tapped, which is kind of nasty because basically a basic land, a basic island that enters tapped. But when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. That is super good with Reality Chip because it lets you control what is on top of your library. And that's super nice because if there's a land on top, you play Halimar Depths instead of playing that land, and you can move it or something. Or look at the top 3 and set them back in any order or whatever. In any case, it helps early game to set your next few draws if you need something earlier. It helps late game to just keep the engine going a little bit more. Yeah, it's really nice. Only downside is that enters tapped. But yeah, that is my Reality Chip artifact deck. Super fun to play. Most of the time it's pretty fun to face. Fun little fact. It used to not be artifacts. My Reality Chip deck used to just be a card draw deck and a lot of scrying and card drawing and some discarding. It wasn't the best. I mean, it kind of only won whenever I had Ominous Seas out. And I just loved drawing a whole lot of cards and then watching other people win. That's funny to me because everyone expects you to go hard and try and win the game as best as you can. And I laugh and say, "Hold my beer. I'm gonna be an idiot." And that's why I love Magic so much. Is I don't. You can play it without playing to win, if that makes sense. And yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, think of subscribing. More Magic content coming next week. I am setting up a schedule so I post every Sunday, Monday, and Thursday. And for now, we're doing deck techs, and perhaps in the future we could start seeing actual games of Magic being played when I get a better camera than just my computer. Um, I'm looking to get a mic so that way the audio isn't this bad. I apologize for the audio. Um, but yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and peace out.